Hello, everyone! Welcome to the Capital Intelligence Channel. Today, we're taking a truly fascinating look at the global economy. But listen, we aren't going to look at it as just a boring collection of stock charts or dry statistics. Instead, we're going to deconstruct it as a complex, totally invisible machine. Think of it as a massive operating system that's continuously running in the background, quietly shaping our daily financial reality, our behaviors, and ultimately our future.
So that brings us to a question we absolutely have to ask. Who really controls the modern economic machine? I mean, for generations, this machine was built on heavy industrial gears, literally powered by credit and cyclical debt. But today, it's evolved. It's been quietly upgraded into a digital, highly algorithmic operating system that actually predicts and guides what we do. So how does this invisible machine actually work? Where are its gears breaking down, and how is it literally being re-engineered right in front of our eyes?
Okay, let's dive into this blueprint for today's explainer. We'll start with Section 1, the modern economic machine. Then, 2, debt, wealth, and inequality. 3, the algorithmic operating system. 4, surveillance capitalism's costs. And finally, 5, the regenerative upgrade. Let's get right into it.
Section 1, the modern economic machine. Let's look at building the foundation.
To really understand the global economy, we kind of have to strip away all the crazy complexity. Legendary investor Ray Dalio popularized this brilliant concept that the economy is, at its core, simply a machine. It looks incredibly complicated from the outside, and sure, it is, but fundamentally, it's driven by basic human nature and zillions of repeated, really simple transactions. Every single time you buy something, you're creating a transaction that turns the gears of this machine. And right at the heart of these transactions is a foundational lifecycle budget constraint. It acts as the basic mathematical engine powering the machine's daily operations. The equation is beautifully simple, really. Income equals consumption plus the change in net worth. Economists use this to track how resources flow. The money you earn either goes toward consuming goods and services today, or it's saved and invested, which changes your net worth for tomorrow. But, what happens when the gears handling this equation start to experience massive friction?
That brings us to Section 2, debt, wealth, and inequality. We're talking about system glitches and friction.
Look, every machine generates heat and friction, and honestly, our economic machine is currently overheating. When we step back and look impartially at the data over the last few decades, we see that the accumulation of debt and wealth has created this widening societal inequality. It's essentially a glitch in the system where capital accumulating at the very top completely changes the mechanics for everyone else. Now, what's really interesting about this is the stark reality revealed by the PSID data, that's the Panel Study of Income Dynamics. If we look at the top 20% of the population, they don't just capture a slightly larger slice of the pie. No, they capture the vast majority of resources. We're talking 42.4% of consumption, 48.2% of income, and a staggering 85.6% of the wealth.
I want to pause and focus specifically on that 85.6% statistic for a second, because, wow, wealth concentration of this magnitude literally changes the physics of the economic machine. Wealth acts as this massive buffer. For those at the top, it cushions against income shocks and funds future consumption. But for the rest of the system's participants, this level of concentration drastically reduces economic mobility. Research shows there's this stickiness at both the top and the bottom of the distribution, meaning if you are born into the bottom wealth tiers, the gears of mobility are essentially jammed, making it incredibly difficult to ever move upward.
And this friction, it scales right up to the institutional level. Academic research closely tracks these systemic glitches in the wider economy. For example, there's this well-documented phenomenon of zombie firms. These are companies that are so heavily indebted, they barely generate enough cash to pay the interest on their debt. They're just staggering along. These firms only survive due to our current debt cycles and credit structures, but they are totally misaligned with long-term productivity and innovation. They tie up crucial capital that could be used for healthy, growing enterprises, acting as a massive drag on the overall machine.
Moving on to Section 3, the algorithmic operating system, a digital software update.
So the old mechanical gears of debt and wealth are clearly under strain. But the machine isn't static, right? Over the last decade, those mechanical gears have received a massive, entirely invisible digital software update via AI and big data. We are now witnessing the rise of the algorithmic consumer. Think about your own smart devices for a second, your digital butlers like Amazon Echo or Google Assistant. These aren't just passive speakers sitting on your counter. They are active nodes in the economic machine. They use data to predict your preferences, seek out the best deals, and they can autonomously execute purchases without you doing a thing. You're no longer just a human consumer. Your data profile has literally turned you into an algorithmic consumer, which fundamentally changes how supply and demand interact in the real world.
Let's move to and see how this builds out in the workplace, specifically within the gig economy. Algorithmic management is taking over human managerial roles in very structured steps. First, obviously there was no automation. Humans managed everything. Then, algorithms stepped in to provide management assistance. But now, we're firmly in an era of partial automation, where algorithms autonomously direct, evaluate, and even discipline gig workers. Now, while this absolutely maximizes efficiency for the platforms, researchers note it introduces immense stress and precariousness for the workers themselves. It strips the human element of empathy and context entirely out of management.
Which brings us to Section 4, Surveillance Capitalism's Costs, the actual price of prediction. This relentless drive for algorithmic efficiency definitely has a dark side. To fuel this new digital operating system, the machine requires a constant, massive intake of raw material. And guess what? That raw material is your behavioral data. It is relentlessly extracted, analyzed, and packaged into prediction products that are sold to the highest bidder. The sociological framework for understanding this really comes from researchers like Shoshana Zuboff. She points out that the quest for algorithmic certainty and behavioral modification seriously threatens to erode our autonomy. In fact, she provocatively states that surveillance capitalism extracts our data and leaves the consumer as an abandoned carcass, completely stripped of free agency. It's a heavy, powerful perspective on how algorithms don't just predict what we will do, they actually actively modify our behavior to ensure their predictions come true.
So how does this actually happen in practice? Just look at these algorithmic pricing tactics used every single day in online interfaces. I guarantee you've seen false scarcity messages like, only 2 left at this price, or those ticking countdown timers designed to trigger a total false sense of urgency. Algorithms also use personalized price steering. For instance, if the system detects you viewed a flight or a product multiple times, it might quietly raise the price to exploit your fear of missing out. These aren't accidents, folks. They are highly engineered features of the machine, explicitly designed to maximize profit extraction by playing directly on your psychological triggers.
And finally, Section 5, the regenerative upgrade, re-engineering the machine.
If the current machine is built on fragile debt cycles, glaring inequality, and extractive surveillance, where do we possibly go from here? Well, analysts, economists, and business leaders are increasingly proposing that we desperately need a system upgrade to fix the fragile supply chains and systemic inequalities currently plaguing the global economy. And this brilliantly illustrates the 2 paths. On one side, we have our current extractive economy. It's heavily debt-driven, incredibly reliant on surveillance capitalism, and it externalizes its costs. That means society and the environment end up paying the price for corporate pollution and gig worker burnout. But on the other side is the proposed regenerative economy. This is a circular model, specifically designed to be sustainable and to internalize costs, meaning businesses actually pay for the environmental and social impacts they create. It's an economic machine designed not just for endless, blind growth, but to actually support human flourishing within the real physical limits of our planet.
Which brings us to the absolute ultimate question we all have to face as this massive transition unfolds. Will the economic machine, with its deep debt cycles and its powerful new algorithmic intelligence, ultimately be upgraded to serve humanity? Or will we allow it to subordinate us to its own extractive logic? It's a question that goes way beyond just economics. It's about the future operating system of our entire society. Keep a close eye on how these systems evolve, because truly understanding the machine is the very first step to ensuring it works for all of us.